It's just past 10 in the morning, June 28th, 1914. A dark green convertible rolls slowly through the streets of Sarajevo, past cheering crowds, past soldiers standing at attention, past a man who has already tried to kill the person sitting inside it. That's not a typo. 20 minutes earlier, somebody threw a bomb at this exact car. It missed. And instead of turning around, canceling the trip, calling it a day, the man in the back seat decided to keep going. His name was Archduke Franz Ferdinand, heir to the throne of Austria-Hungary, one of the most powerful empires on earth. Within the hour, he would be dead. Within 5 weeks, so would the peace of an entire continent. And here's the part almost nobody expects. The reason Franz Ferdinand ended up in the exact spot where his killer was standing wasn't a master plan. It wasn't clever positioning by the assassins, most of whom had already given up. It was a driver taking a wrong turn on a street he'd been told not to take. So here's the real question this video is going to answer. How does a wrong turn, the kind of mistake any of us could make, end up igniting a war that kills more than 15 million people? And is it really fair to blame a driver for World War I? Let's go back to the beginning of that morning and figure out how something this small became something this big. To understand why one bad afternoon in Sarajevo mattered so much, you have to understand what Europe looked like in the summer of 1914. It looked calm. It was not calm. For decades, the great powers of Europe had been quietly arranging themselves into two rival camps. Germany, Austria, Hungary, and Italy on one side, France, Russia, and Britain on the other. These alliances were supposed to keep the peace. The idea being that no country would dare start a war, it might have to fight alone against everyone else. Instead, they built something closer to a line of loaded guns, each one pointed at the next. Add to that a wave of nationalism sweeping through the Balkans, a region where the Austro-Hungarian Empire and the Ottoman Empire had both been slowly losing their grip for 100 years. Serbia, a small but fiercely independent kingdom, had spent decades dreaming of uniting Slavic peoples across the Balkans, including the Bosnian Serbs living inside the borders of Austria-Hungary, which had annexed Bosnia outright in 1908. A lot of Serbian nationalists saw that annexation as theft. A few of them decided to do something about it. That's the Powder Keg. Alliances stretched tight across the continent in a regional dispute simmering in the Balkans that most of Europe hadn't paid serious attention to in years. All it needed was a spark. The spark had a name. The Black Hand, a secret Serbian nationalist society with a taste for political violence and a habit of arming teenagers. In the spring of 1914, they recruited a small group of young Bosnian Serbs, including a sickly, intensely serious 19-year-old named Gavrilo Princip, trained them, armed them with pistols and bombs, and sent them to Sarajevo with one job: kill the Archduke. Franz Ferdinand's visit wasn't an accident of timing either. He arrived on June 28th, Vidovdan, St. Vitus Day, the anniversary of a 14th century battle that had become sacred to Serbian national memory. Most historians agree that scheduling a visit by the Austro-Hungarian heir in Bosnia on that particular day read to many Bosnian Serbs as less of a coincidence and more of a provocation. Whether that symbolism was the decisive factor or simply one more grievance among many is something historians still debate, but it clearly didn't help. The conspirators spread themselves along the Archduke's motorcade route that morning. 7 young men with bombs and pistols hidden in their coats, standing in a crowd that had turned out, at least in part, to see him. And one by one, as the cars rolled past, most of them froze, lost their nerve, did nothing, except one. As the Archduke's car passed the Kumurya Bridge, a conspirator named Nedeljko Chabrinović pulled the pin on a bomb and threw it at the car. It bounced. Franz Ferdinand's driver, seeing something fly toward them, hit the accelerator. The bomb bounced off the folded roof of the convertible, rolled under the car behind it, and exploded, wounding several officers and bystanders, but leaving the Archduke and his wife, Sophie, completely unharmed. Chabrinović swallowed a cyanide pill and jumped into the river to avoid capture. The cyanide was old and just made him vomit. The river was about 6 inches deep. He was fished out and arrested within minutes. By every reasonable measure, the assassination plot was already over. It had failed. Here's where most people expect the story to end, and where it very nearly did. If Franz Ferdinand had simply left Sarajevo after the bombing, history might have filed this away as a strange, violent footnote. Instead, he did something that says a great deal about who he actually was. He insisted on continuing the day's schedule. Furious but resolute, he went ahead with the official reception at Sarajevo's town hall, where, by all accounts, he interrupted the mayor's prepared welcome speech to angrily point out that someone had just tried to kill him with a bomb, and then, having made his point, allowed the ceremony to continue anyway. Then he made a decision that had nothing to do with politics and everything to do with character. He wanted to visit the officers who'd been wounded in the blast at the city hospital. It was a decent thing to do. It also meant the day's route, the route the assassins had studied, the route the police had planned around, was no longer the plan. And this is where the story stops being about bombs and Balkan politics and starts being about something almost embarrassingly small. Nobody told the driver. The new route to the hospital required the motorcade to continue straight along the Appel Quay, the road running beside the river, rather than turning onto a side street called Franz Josef Street, which had been part of the original itinerary. General Oskar Potiorek, the Austro-Hungarian governor of Bosnia, was riding in the car and knew about the change. His driver, a man named Leopold Lojka, either wasn't informed or simply forgot under the pressure of the morning. As the car approached the junction, he turned the wheel and steered the Archduke's car directly onto Franz Josef Street, the wrong street, following a plan that no longer existed. Potiorek reportedly shouted at him immediately. This was the wrong way. They were supposed to stay on the quay. Lojka stopped the car. He had to reverse to correct course, and the car stalled. It stalled directly in front of a small delicatessen at the corner of Franz Josef Street and the Appel Quay, a shop owned by a man named Moritz Schiller. Popular retellings love to add that Gavrilo Princip, having given up on the plot after the failed bombing, had wandered over to that exact shop to buy a sandwich and simply looked up to find his target parked in front of him. It's a wonderful detail. It also doesn't hold up especially well under scrutiny. Historians have never been able to confirm the sandwich, and it appears to be a later embellishment that made a strange story feel even stranger. What we do know, from multiple contemporary accounts, is simpler and almost as remarkable. Princip happened to be standing near that corner when the car, through no plan of his, stopped less than 5 feet in front of him. He had a clear shot he never should have had. He took it. 2 shots. The first hit Sophie in the abdomen. The second hit Franz Ferdinand in the neck. According to Count Franz von Harrach, who was riding in the car, the Archduke's last words were a plea for his wife to stay alive, for the sake of their children. Sophie died almost instantly. Franz Ferdinand died roughly 10 minutes later. An assassination plot that had already failed once succeeded because a driver took a wrong turn down a street he'd been explicitly told to avoid and then stalled the engine trying to fix his mistake, directly in front of the one conspirator still standing there. None of that by itself was supposed to mean a world war. Political assassinations weren't new in 1914. Kings, prime ministers, and archdukes had been killed before without triggering continental catastrophe. What made this one different was what Austria-Hungary chose to do with it. Convinced that Serbia's government was behind the plot and backed by an unconditional promise of support from its ally Germany, historians call it the blank check, Austria-Hungary issued Serbia a deliberately harsh ultimatum on July 23rd, with demands almost designed to be rejected. Serbia's response was conciliatory but incomplete. Austria-Hungary declared war on Serbia 5 days later. Then the alliance system that had been holding Europe's tension in careful balance for decades did exactly what it was built to do, only in reverse. Russia began mobilizing to defend Serbia. Germany declared war on Russia, then on Russia's ally France. To knock France out quickly, German war planners invaded neutral Belgium, a country Britain had promised to protect. On August 4th, Britain declared war on Germany. In the space of about 5 weeks, a shooting on a street corner in Sarajevo had pulled every major power in Europe into a war that would eventually kill more than 15 million people, soldiers and civilians combined. By the time the guns finally fell silent in November 1918, four empires that had dominated world affairs for centuries, the German, Austro-Hungarian, Russian, and Ottoman empires, had all collapsed. The map of Europe and the Middle East was redrawn almost entirely, creating new nations, new borders, and, in more than a few cases, new grievances that would take decades to fully play out. The economic and political chaos that followed in Germany would help set the stage, one generation later, for an even larger war. None of that was written into the plot the Black Hand carried out on June 28, 1914. They wanted a political statement in the Balkans. They accidentally lit the fuse on the modern era. So, was it really just a wrong turn that started World War I? Not entirely, and it's worth being honest about that. Most historians agree the assassination was the spark, not the fuel. The alliances, the arms race, the nationalism, the imperial rivalries, those had been building for decades, and a great many historians, going back to the influential work of scholars like Christopher Clark, argued that some kind of major European war was becoming disturbingly likely, with or without Sarajevo. Others place more weight on the specific decisions made by German and Austro-Hungarian leadership in the weeks after the assassination. It's a genuine, ongoing historical debate, and there isn't a single tidy answer. But here's what the wrong turn does tell us, honestly and without exaggeration. The assassination didn't have to succeed. A failed bomb, a change of hospital plans nobody communicated properly, a driver's mistake, a stalled engine, remove any single one of those, and Gavrilo Princip never gets his second chance. The war might still have come. It might have come differently later, over some other crisis entirely. But it wouldn't have come like this, on this day, for this reason. That's the part worth sitting with. Not that one wrong turn caused a war. History is rarely that simple, and it doesn't deserve to be flattened into a single, tidy irony. But that the difference between a strange news story out of the Balkans and the deadliest conflict the world had ever seen came down to a driver who didn't know which way to turn the wheel. Big history is made of small moments. Most of the time, we never find out which ones mattered. On June 28, 1914, the world found out immediately, and it's still living with the answer.